Welcome, welcome, welcome to everyone that's watching this evening. We're really excited about this program. You know, as prostate cancer continues to claim lives disproportionately when it comes to men of color. But at an HBCU in the heart of Atlanta, groundbreaking research is shifting the narrative. And in this episode of If You Are My Brothers podcast, we chat with Dr. Chaudhary. He is the executive director of the Center for Cancer Research and Therapeutic Development at Clark Atlanta University. And this is our Black History Month series. And during the series, we're going to be highlighting the advances in prostate cancer research, the ongoing legacy of finding a cure, and the leadership necessary to drive these efforts.
So we have a confirmation with a second opinion that he definitely has prostate cancer.
Welcome to the If You Are My Brothers podcast, a podcast created to break the silence around prostate cancer. It is a conversation, and I'm Reggie Hicks, your host. And welcome to everyone watching on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn Live. And to those listening later on your favorite podcast platforms, we say thank you for tuning in and thank you for sharing and liking this podcast. Before we begin, a quick reminder that this podcast is not a substitute for your medical team. Some conversations may be of an adult nature, and so we want to make sure you realize that and listen accordingly, and always consult your healthcare provider regarding your personal healthcare decisions. Now, to learn more about this podcast and the If You Are My Brothers documentary and community engagement project, you can visit our website at ifyouaremybrothers.org. That's If You Are My Brothers, all one word, .org. You see it there on the screen. Thank you, Danny. In the meantime, we ask you to join the conversation this evening. And you can do that in the chat. You can ask questions. You can share comments. We always want to remind you this is real life. So whenever we talk, it's not a presentation. It is a conversation. So we want you to engage with us. Now, our guest this evening is Dr. Jaideep Chaudhary. And Dr. Chaudhary is a full professor and executive director of the Center for Cancer Research and Therapeutic Development. I could say that backwards. I've known the organization and the individuals there for a number of years. This is the first time that Dr. Chaudhary and I will have a chance to talk, and looking forward to talking with him and speaking with him about the wonderful things they're doing at CCRTD, which is at Clark Atlanta University. And it's one of the nation's leading prostate cancer research centers. He is a distinguished cancer biologist. He has authored more than 60 peer-reviewed publications. He holds 3 patents and has secured major research funding for the institutions he's been involved of, including CCRTD. His work focuses on the molecular basis of prostate cancer and health disparities. He has mentored over 17 PhD students, like from them starting to getting that PhD at the end of their name. And as a higher education leader, he promotes impactful research, collaboration across academic disciplines, faculty diversity, and resources for student and faculty success. So, Doctor, it's good to have you here with us. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Reggie. It's an honor and pleasure to be sitting next to you and having a conversation.
Dr. Chaudhary, for listeners who may not know about CCRTD, and as I mentioned, I've known and been involved with the organization over the many years, what is its mission and why is it located at Clark Atlanta University? Why is that so significant?
First of all, Reggie, thank you for asking that question. But before I start, I want to thank you to invite me in this podcast, and I want to thank all the listeners who are here, who are joining us. And I think this is a great opportunity for both of us to spread the message on prostate cancer, especially for the Center for Cancer Research and Therapeutic Development, to let people know who we are, what we do, and why we are there. I mean, that's your first question. When we started this cancer center way back in 2004, we existed before that, but we were focused on almost every other cancer that the faculty was involved in. In 2004, we specifically chose to focus on prostate cancer. Multiple reasons for that. One is that prostate cancer has significant health disparities, means it affects at least twice more African American men, both in terms of mortality and incidence, approximately. And we don't know why, right? That was one of the biggest focus of what we really wanted to start at that time. And that's why we focused on prostate cancer. Because at that time, there was not much going on health disparities in prostate cancer. And Clark Atlanta University was the space where we wanted to, work towards this mission. We are in the neighborhood. We serve the community. We have connections. We can actually talk to them, understand what's going on. So how can we bring your experiences to research? I think this was a natural thing for us to do. So since we started, we have grown. We have grown both in terms of the staff and the faculty who performs research. We have grown both in terms of the money that we bring in for research. We have also grown in terms of the impact we have on the national prostate cancer scene, but also more importantly, on the local prostate cancer scene. So for us, there are three missions. And you can slice them and dice them either way you want. First is to really do an impactful research in prostate cancer, to understand, how this disease develops, why it becomes so incurable so fast, right? And how do we develop better treatments? What are the better ways to diagnose it, right? So that is one of the basic fundamental mission we have, and almost all our faculty is involved in that kind of a research. The second mission is to train our next generation of scientists. Right? So we want to give them a platform where we can train them and help them start their research in prostate cancer, and not only in prostate cancer, but in any cancer that has a disparity component attached to it. So that was one of the biggest goal for us. And as you mentioned, 17 students graduated from my lab, but since 2004, we have graduated about 45, 50 students from the cancer center. And it makes me proud to say that each one of them is doing wonderful in their field. They all graduated from here. And the third biggest component is, as I mentioned earlier, to be part of the community, which we call as community engagement. How do we bring the resources to the community? What do we listen from them? What are the experiences? What are the living experiences for the community that we can connect to the research we are doing? One of the fundamental things that I want to do is that whatever research which we do is driven by communities' living experiences. What are they experiencing in the real world? What are they going through? So we have to bridge that gap. I firmly believe that research that we do on the bench should not be isolated. It has to be community driven. And I think that is where my bigger focus is these days.
So let me ask you about this. From your perspective, what findings are coming out of CCRTD that have the greatest potential to change how prostate cancer is treated in the future? And I ask that question because I think sometimes when they see a commercial on TV about a new drug and, maybe it's dealing with metastatic prostate cancer. And I think a lot of folks don't understand how that process comes about and where an organization, a center like CCRTD, where do you come in that finding the different drugs that people are using and all the way till it being on the market and the clinical trials and things like that?
Okay, good question. So I'll take a minute to explain that process. So most of the drugs, which we call as experimental drugs, are actually discovered in the labs, just like us. And remember, every drug has to target something that is involved in prostate cancer. That something could be a protein, something like that, which is more in prostate cancer or less in prostate cancer. But we have to figure out what the target is that we want to develop a drug. Or, unlike therapeutic drugs like docetaxel, which will kill every other cell. We don't want that. We want to make sure that we have a targeted strategy that has a role in prostate cancer, right? That is how we want to work. And the drug industry, drug development business is a $10 billion business for one drug with about 95% failure rate. And out of about 100 drugs, for example, that we discover, only about 2 to 3% will actually go to the market. And that whole pipeline is about 10 years long. Okay, so it is not that we develop a drug today in the lab which works very well on mice, and then we go to the market, and unfortunately majority of the drugs that work on the mice don't work on the humans, right? So it's okay for me to say that we do majority of our drug testing in the mice. So that is kind of where we are good at. We know the targets, we can develop new drugs, we can test them on the mice, But then we have to transition to clinical trials. Then that's where we develop a partnership, and then there are different phases, phase 1 trial, just to see whether the drug has any adverse side effect, how much dose can be tolerated. That is the most high risk part of the clinical trial. That is called phase 1. Once we figure out that this drug is probably going to be okay, and it is going to reduce the cancer burden, then that drug goes to phase 2, where we start to treat a larger group of people with prostate cancer. Then it goes to stage 3, where we involve multiple centers, not just say not that in phase 3 we don't want to involve only Emory. We want to go to UCSF, we want to go to Fred Hatch, we want to go to New York to cover diverse population, right? So we invite patients, we call for patients, specifically those who are suitable to be treated with that drug, right? It's not that every prostate cancer patient, because that drug has a very specific target. We want to select the patients to make sure that we have the right population. And now there is also a big push to include diversity in the population that we treat, right? So it's a big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. A lot of time goes into it, but almost everything is done from an academic standpoint. The discovery, and many times all the way to phase 3, we will end up partnering with big pharma because they have the money to drive that kind of a research. They have that kind of resources to put in, and they're going to make a lot of money also in the process. So that's a pipeline for the drug development. Now, your next question was how are we positioned ourselves and what are we doing? So almost every lab that we have here has some major component of drug development. Like my lab has a new drug that we are working on. We are targeting a specific population of cells called stem cells, which survive even radiation therapy or chemotherapy. So how to kill those guys, because they are lurking around. They'll come like 2-3 years later and be relapsed, and then give you relapse. Couple of labs working on that, and there is one lab which is working on finding out treatment for how the cancer cells migrate from one organ to another, because that's what cancer does. It's metastatic. So how do you stop metastasis, right? And then there is one lab that really works on how to improve the efficacy of androgen replacement therapy, or ADT. How do we improve that? How to desensitize, how to bring those cells back to sensitivity, which have developed androgen deprivation therapy. And there's another lab that actually says that, I know what all of you guys are doing, but there are thousands of drugs in the market already which are FDA approved. I bet some of them can be used to treat prostate cancer. Interesting, right? In the therapeutic part of it, because those drugs have been tested, we know the toxicity, and we know what they do. We don't have to go to FDA for clearance of the drug or do everything. There's a pharma company already manufacturing it. So why don't we start looking at those drugs, right? So they do a lot of computational analysis. That's where AI comes in, and they just try to figure out how can we repurpose the drug. So there are a lot of ways you can look at it, but I think you can be a big institute, a big university, and you can have a lot of resources to do what you want, but you can be a small school like us, a small center, but be very focused on what you do. So had to maximize on the impact. And then when you bring the community partners with you, they tell us that, this is what the problem is in the community. This is what we really want us to focus on. This is what we are experiencing. So that gives us a leverage, a focus on doing the kind of research that we do. So that's kind of where our impact is.
You said that you go out to the population and see, what is it that they might want to see. Can you give me an example, or give us an example rather, of how that happens at CCRTD specifically?
We have a community engagement arm of the cancer center. But, before I even get there, I must say that we get a lot of funding from National Institute of Health. Okay. So a major part of the community engagement is supported by these funded grants. So, and that's kind of where we go. And all the acknowledgement to NIH and MIHD for supporting the kind of research that we do. And of course, we also get a lot of money from private donors and funders and state resources who support the kind of research that we do. The reason I'm saying that is because without their help, these kind of things cannot be done. So that is why I wanted to acknowledge that up front. So we go to the community, getting back to your question, community health organizers, church, and talk to them. Health fairs, we talk to them, and we disseminate the information on what prostate cancer is. Why is that? Why you should be going for PSA testing, and educate them. And then we have a conversation as to and they open up after these sessions. They open up. I was treated with this and this drug, and this doesn't work. But I become resistant. And even though I had prostatectomy, I still got metastasis. That now we are trying to figure it out. Okay, so this is what is happening in the community. This is what their experiences are. How do we address that? So that conversation and what they are experiencing becomes a very important matrix and the goal for us to achieve. How do we address these things in the community? I simply don't want to sit in my lab and start thinking as to what's going on in a hypothetical scenario. When I can continue to do my research, but if I can connect my research with what is being experienced by what is happening, then you make a powerful story. You can actually convince to do the right kind of research. The right kind of research, the research that has a direct impact on the communities we serve.
What are you most proud about as far as what has come out of CCRTD? And I know in research, as you mentioned, like 2 or 3% actually kind of go to actually become a drug. What are you most proud of and successful? And then what is where you thought you were going down the right road, but you kind of hit a dead end? Or what was most disappointing? Or is there a time when you say, oh, wow, I thought we really had something here and we didn't? And how do you handle that? How do you deal with that? And your researchers, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Science is 99% aspiration and only 1% success. So your question is very valid. And as a scientist, we neither hope nor despair. I mean, we just follow the data and then make the right decisions and what to do. Many times we get a dead end and say, maybe this is not the right approach. Let's start from the ground up. Maybe we don't have enough information to understand the data that we're getting. That's actually a major part of it. And like just a few days back, one of my students showed me the data, which I said, well, this is strange. I have never seen this happening. And the reality was that we didn't know how to figure out what's going on, right? But it is the data, it is telling us something which is very, very significant. But now we have to figure it out because the data is not lying, right? So the bigger thing that we have is what we now know. How or what are the pathways involved in cancer metastasis? Okay, that we have a very clear understanding of how that process goes. We have a very clear understanding of how stem cells survive chemotherapy and radiation treatment. And in many cases, the androgen deprivation therapy that we use all the time may actually support the development of these cancer stem cells. Means rather than being helpful, ADT might be, may we have to be very careful when I say that ADT might be in some cases, in some patients, may not be that effective as we were expecting. Right? Let's put it that way. And we have developed major tools to analyze big scale data, large scale data through AI, which can help us drive to make better decisions moving forward. I mean, there is another group that is working on, which I think is pretty big, on every cancer cell has, tens of hundreds of different other cells around it, which are not cancerous, but they are fueling the growth of the cancer cells. How to figure out why are they fueling the growth of those cancer cells? How can we manage that part, develop drugs or do something that they don't fuel the growth of those cancer cells, right? So those are the major discoveries. And, the biggest achievement of what we have is that we are training the next generation of scientists. That is the part that I love the most because we want to leave a legacy of what we have done and give the torch to the next generation to carry on forward, right? That's exactly what we really want to do. And failures are numerous. I mean, I don't want to even start telling you what the failures are.
It's all part of being a scientist, right? You got to deal with the failures.
It is all part of being the scientist, and every day there is some setback that you get, but then you stand up and move on. And, that is what science is all about. And I think that is with every other job that you do. Failures are part of success.
As a matter of fact, sometimes failure can drive success. It can, it can kind of steer you in the direction you need to go. Now, you mentioned earlier on about clinical trials, and one of the things, this being Black History Month, I think when we think about history as it pertains to clinical trials, everybody reverts back to that Tuskegee experiment, that infamous syphilis study. In your opinion, because I know a lot of us remember it, I think we're starting to kind of age out of it, but is it still prevalent in how people look at clinical trials? I guess the question is, are we getting better at getting people of color to get involved in clinical trials, or do we still have a ways to go? And what do we do?
Well, very good question, and there are a couple of perspectives on it. I think the Tuskegee is still on the minds, that still drives people away from clinical trials. And something like that is very difficult to erase from the memories. Difficult to erase because you lost trust. And to regain the trust and to build that trust is going to take generations. Some of us have moved on. That was part one. I know I said multiple aspects to that. That aspect is that it's going to take multiple generations for us to realize. And the aspect two is actually linked to aspect one, which make things even more complicated, is that we have never reached out to the African American community to participate in clinical trials effectively. That again gives a bad trust, that you don't trust us, right? So that is why are you not coming to our community, right? So there are multiple things that are happening. And that's the bigger issue that we have to address. Why are we not involving our community in the clinical trials? We talk about community engagement, we want to go to the community and talk about it. It just doesn't happen overnight. It is going to take a lot of time and effort to bring everybody on board. It's a slow process, and I can assure you there are a lot of community engagement activities, events going on around the country to promote that. But if you're expecting the results to happen overnight, that is not going to come. For example, NIH has a push to involve diversity in clinical trials. That's a big part of it. And I will give you an example. So, and don't quote me on this because I read it somewhere. There were a lot of clinical trials going on, but more recent clinical trials have shown where you have a good involvement of African American men, that despite having most advanced disease, that is the African American men, when they enroll in the trials, they responded better to the treatments and had better outcomes compared to white patients involved in a similar trial. So that's actually very positive. So that means something is working, and that's a very positive, and that positive information needs to be shared. And I think we as part of the Cancer Center have a responsibility through our community engagement to share that positive information and encourage participation of African American men in clinical trials.
And so with that being said, it's a slow process, but it seems to me you're saying that we're making progress.
We are making progress, but I'm very cautiously optimistic that we don't want to overrun the process. Because, convincing somebody, making sure that they have confidence takes time. It is not going to happen overnight, right? And that is why all these community engagement networks and organizers are doing. They are developing a relationship so we can convince them to participate in the clinical trials. That doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, it's going to take time. But again, you've got to be deliberate about it. And it seems to me that at CCRTD is one of the things that you're doing. Can you talk a little bit more about your community engagement? Is it local to Atlanta, or are you all expanding out with that?
It is all resource-based, Reggie. With the kind of resources we have, we are more focused in Atlanta, neighboring counties, so that we actually want to develop a good relationship here first. So as we expand our community engagement part, we intend to expand into other underserved communities, right? So it's a slow process. And it's all resource dependent because every community engagement takes a lot of time to bring it together. But we have a pretty good, strong footprint in Atlanta, at least in the South Fulton County. The county that I really want to expand is Clayton, because Clayton has a very high incidence of prostate cancer. All the statistics are not good, so we really want to expand there and have a strong footprint in Clayton County and encourage the men over there to really at least start going to their primary physician, get the PSA, at least the fundamentals should be there.
Well, I want to say this, and I've always said this about CCRTD. You do have that commitment, are a cancer research center. And so a lot of times, as you said, the focus is on the research, the focus is on the lab and the scientist. And a lot of folk doing what you're doing at CCRTD don't really reach out to the community. And I've always been impressed by the fact that that has been one of those pillars that you mentioned at the beginning. And I think that what we're finding out, as you said, once you do go out, you also, it's like a different kind of laboratory, right? You're getting feedback from the community. This didn't work. I had this issue. And all those bits of information goes towards hopefully getting to the place where it'll put you all out of business at some point, in a sense of leading to my next question about the future. I had the opportunity to interview Dr. T. Ming Chu, widely regarded as the father of the PSA. And during the interview, he did express that he believed that prostate cancer would be the first cancer to be cured. So looking ahead 5-10 years, how do you see CCRTD shaping that future of prostate cancer research and treatment? Do you share that we could be getting close to making this thing go away, or at least being able to live with it? I think men are starting to be able to live with it now longer than ever before.
So my expectation would be that we would have enough or better treatments that we can live longer. Okay, that's kind of where I have a very measured expectation from what we do. Can we fully treat prostate cancer? Yes and no. If diagnosed early, then we have better chances. But if diagnosed much later, then we really don't have a whole lot of choices. And that's where the research should focus, and that's where we are focusing. In 10 years from now, I think we should be making significant progress in having African American men more and more to at least do PSA so we can get it early, right? Reggie, it is not a question of how effective the treatment would be or where the research is going. It is how early we can catch it so we can really have an effective treatment to treat it. I mean, I'll just give you the number, and I really wanted to share with the community. So when PSA screening started, it resulted in overall 50% decrease in mortality. Meaning we have 50% less people dying of prostate cancer after PSA. If for any chance, if all PSA screening were to be suspended by NIH and say, in the US, NIH says, we don't need PSA, just get rid of it, okay? And after 10 years, we would have lost additional almost 30,000 men from prostate cancer. And these numbers tell you a whole lot. That means we are already there if we do our part. I think that is why I was saying I'm very cautiously optimistic. We need to do our part. We are doing our part for developing new strategies for treatment. But that is one of the major activities that we do in the community. How can we encourage them to go do a PSA testing? Many times when I talk to the folks out there, they don't even know where the prostate is. We talk to them for 1 hour and they come to you and say, what are you talking about? So, I look at it from not only from the science perspective, I look at it from the science perspective, from engagement perspective, from the communities that we serve. We all have to come together. It is a collective effort from all sides. So we have to really not be focused only on one thing, but it is going to come together. Just like breast cancer. There is so much of awareness for breast cancer. If I tell you this number, the incidence of breast cancer and mortality with breast cancer is exactly almost the same as prostate. But you go out, your Komen foundations and the pink ribbons and so much of awareness, it is unbelievable. We can't match it. So they are so much aware. But we have to get there. It is somehow we have to educate men to be there. And that is a collective effort, That is part of the treatment, Reggie, to make the circle full.
Right. And so that being said, what would you say to a man right now listening, watching this, and maybe hesitant when it comes to prostate cancer diagnosis, may not want to even deal with it, or may not even know what their PSA is? What message would you want to leave with them today?
If they don't know what PSA or they don't want to deal with it, my message is simple. If you have high PSA or if you have prostate cancer, you will have to deal with it. Whether you want to deal with it early and treat yourself, or you want to deal with it later when you have reached a point of no return. The decision is yours. That is a shocking statement to give, but that is the real statement. I'm not mincing my words. They need to get to their primary physician, or they come to cancer center, talk to us, reach out to the cancer center. We will convince them to get a PSA testing done. We will explain it. Maybe we were not able to capture you in any one of our community engagement, but that is why we are in the community. That is exactly why we are there. So we've talked to us, and we can have an open session and talk about it. But you must go to your primary physician. And if you're an African American, I recommend that if you're at 42, 45 years of age, that's probably when you want to first start talking to your doctor to have a PSA test. And you can tell them that, I'm African American man. I'm a high risk person. And in this population, the cancer starts pretty early. So I would request a PSA test. They can't deny you. Nobody can deny that. When it's for your own health, it's preventive. So I think those are the things. So let's talk. Let's have a conversation.
And how can communities and families and organizations support the kind of work that you all are doing at CCRTD?
The families support what we do. Engagement is one part, and we do a lot of fun things with them. We can try to engage with them. They come to our events. One is a financial commitment that they give money for us to support the cancer research. They give us, donations to support the community engagement events. So there are a lot of ways people can help us out. Every cent, every dollar counts. I can't say cents now because every dollar counts.
Spoken like a true executive director.
Yeah, science is expensive. Everything that you do. We also want to tell our funding agencies that our community is involved in addressing this issue. That's a very strong message. We want to tell our institution that our community is involved in it. So I think community participation without giving money is as good as participation by giving money. That takes us a long way to support what we do.
Wonderful. And we'll also have a link in the show notes so that someone can get in contact with you all, support you financially or to volunteer. And thank you, Dr. Chaudhary, for being here. This is the first time we've actually met. I've known your predecessor for a long time, Dr. Khan, and just real excited about the work that you all are doing. And I knew about CCRTD before I was diagnosed, before I got into the advocacy part of it. I always say that Dr. Khan was the reason for my selecting my treatment after we had a conversation and gave me some very valuable words of wisdom. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. So, and I'll tell you right quick, I was in his office and I asked him, I said, well, Dr. Khan, if you had prostate cancer, you're a researcher, you're close to this, what would you do? And he said, I would have it removed, because if something happens later on, you have radiation, there are other options that you probably would be a little bit more difficult if you did radiation and stuff, which people select on the front end. And for me, that made a lot of sense because, to be honest with you, having it removed was at the bottom of my list. And I was relatively young. I was in my early 50s at the time. Fast forward 12 years later, about a year ago, I had a chemical reoccurrence after 12 years, and I had proton therapy available to me because I had not had radiation before. And I'm happy to report that my last PSA, which was about a week ago, was non-detectable.
Oh my God, that's so good. I had a doctor's appointment today for something. So I go to the doctor and he asked me what I do. I told him. Then, he breaks down. He said, oh, I have prostate cancer. And, the doc starts telling me what. I said, you're a doctor. Why didn't you go to prostatectomy first? He said, I did, but it has come back. And it has metastasized. So I have to do some homework to help him out too. So I'm going to help him out as much as I can to figure out any clinical trials that he can participate. So, we have to make some right decisions. And that is the message we have to send to our community, Reggie. This is collective between me and you. We have to take care of everybody.
Yeah, the word you said was community. And you're talking to your doctor and Dr. Khan talking to me, and the many conversations that are being had through CCRTD's community engagement and what we're trying to do here with If You Are My Brothers. I think as I get more and more into this, it really is about community and getting the word out. And, we'll have some successes, we'll have some failures, and, not to be disappointed. But we had a very great conversation, and I think that this particular episode will really move some folk into understand the processes and the things that are going on that we just kind of take for granted sometimes, that you all are working very, very hard to help us and get men through this journey called prostate cancer.
And Reggie, thank you for inviting me on this. And thank you for sharing experiences, because again, it is a collective effort. We both and others have to make a difference.
Absolutely. And we're going to have you back on, and maybe some of these new and young minds that you all are shaping there at the center. We'd love to get some of the young folk on and talk about it.
Well, it'll be an honor to come here and talk all about it.
All right. Dr. Chaudhary, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we thank you for your leadership, for your vision, and for the groundbreaking work that's happening at Clark Atlanta University and the Center for Cancer Research and Therapeutic Development. It's a mouthful, but it's CCRTD.
Yes. So, Reggie, thank you very much for inviting. And before I step out, I really want to thank all my faculty and staff and students, without whom this center is not going to move an inch forward. It is all of their effort, all of their hard work, and that's why we are here. So, with deep respect and gratitude to all my community members, all the community partners, and the CCRTD staff and faculty. They are the ones that make us do what we do.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary. We appreciate it. And during Black History Month, it's important to highlight institutions like CCRTD and the leaders that are shaping the future of cancer research and health equity. If this conversation helped you, we ask you to share it with a brother, father, son, friend. This is all about the community, as we talked about earlier. You can visit us at ifyouaremybrothers.org to learn more about our documentary, our podcast series, and the all-important community engagement work. Now, we want to remind you that If You Are My Brothers is a 501c3 project of Straight Street Media, and is dedicated to turning prostate cancer awareness into health action. That's the thing that we like to say around here, health action. And you can support us in a number of different ways, from going to the website to using the old snail mail and sending a check. And we do appreciate your contributions. When you do make that contribution, you will receive your very own If You Are My Brothers commemorative mug. And I use this mug on every episode with my tea. And folks, I've gotten some calls of what is actually in that. It's just tea. I guarantee you. But you get a mug, and that's just our way of saying thank you for helping us out. And we also want to thank the folks at Atlanta Brand Central for providing the new mugs, for donating them for this project. Now, during our year-end campaign, many of you were entered into our very special drawing to win an original painting inspired by the If You Are My Brothers logo. Now, the painting is aptly titled The Brotherhood of Man. It was titled by its creator, renowned artist Cecil Bernard. Now, we held the drawing last week live on YouTube, and you can check it out right here on our YouTube channel. And we'd like to congratulate our winner, Tanya L. of Houston, Texas. Please visit Cecil Bernard. You can look him up. He's also in our show notes, his website, and all of our show notes, and check out some of his great work. And we want to thank Tanya L. of Houston for being the winner, and thank you all for making a contribution during our year-end campaign. We raised our goal, we had a challenge grant, and we were able to get that challenge grant because you and other folk that think this is important enough for financial support made the commitment. So we want to thank you. And as you listen and watch, we have various episodes. Today, we're dealing with research at an HBCU at Clark Atlanta University and CCRTD. We also have a number of treatment options. We talk to doctors, we talk to survivors. We're going to be cataloging those by subject so that as we continue to do these, you'll be able to go in and maybe check out proton therapy, or maybe you're looking at having a prostatectomy. Whatever treatment options, we'll have folk on to talk about it, and also survivors to talk about it as well. We want to say a special thank you to our producer, Danny Garcia Pozo, and also for Zach Reynolds at Borkhouse Productions for our opening. Thank you, Zach, so much for helping us out. Remember, this podcast is not a replacement for your medical advice. Always refer to your healthcare provider, your healthcare team for that. And we also want to remind you and encourage you to tune in to our next episode on Thursday, February 26th at 7 p.m. right here on this YouTube channel as we continue our Black History Month series. And we'll take a look at the history of clinical trials and their impact on communities of color. We're going to kind of take up where we left off with our discussion this evening. So until next time, remember, if you are my brothers, please share this message. So take care, stay healthy, peace.